It's your boy ConserViz34, and today I wanted to make a video entitled 2017, the year of John Mayer. Now, the reason I wanted to highlight him regarding all these live shows that many fans were able to see across the world is because John Mayer did it in a bunch of different ways, and he did it throughout the year non-stop. We definitely want to wish him the best as well. He had emergency appendectomy surgery about a month ago, and they had to cancel some Dead and Company shows. But regardless of that, he toured the world in a bunch of different ways, and we'll look at 3 ways he did it. First is going to be his solo touring. Second is going to be his touring with Dead and Company. And then the last way is going to be some special shows he did, including ones with Dave Chappelle. So let's look at his solo touring this year. It had been a while since John Mayer was on the road for a U.S. tour and even a world tour. He had done some select shows here and there for the last couple of years, but it hadn't done a full tour. So what was great about this tour? One thing that made this tour great was the new music from The Search for Everything was great live. It was great studio material, and then when it got sent to the stage and you were sitting in the stands, in the various vantage points of a venue, it sounded great. That is something that is very hard to do when you're over a decade in the game like John, and you see many legends. One of the biggest things that is difficult about seeing a legendary artist is they're trying to push this new music on you. Case in point, Roger Waters, he is a legend. His show was great this year in Hartford, but some of the new stuff, that's when I went to the bathroom. That's when I was anxiously awaiting the encore and some other stuff he was going to do later on in the show, because it's not as good as his things that he did with Pink Floyd. So that changes really the game of seeing someone when you know they have an album, they're 5, 6, 7, 8 albums in, and they can do something like John did with The Search for Everything. It's always a nice thing. Other thing he did great was he actually had different phases to his show. When you saw his live show, you didn't just get him and his band. You got also him doing acoustic songs, 3 or 4 a night. He had some special guests during those acoustic songs, which was kind of cool depending on where you saw him. And then after these acoustic songs, he did 3 or 4 songs with the John Mayer Trio. Now, what is that? That is a little group that John formed while he was in his blues phases about a decade ago, with him on guitar, a bass player by the name of Pino Palladino, and Mr. Steve Jordan on the drums. And they also, Pino and Steve, were there the entire show. But when you get those 3 players isolated playing some very raw blues, some very raw rock and roll, it's definitely a great thing to see live. And before this, a lot of their shows were in smaller venues. It was harder to get tickets. But for this Search for Everything tour, you could see this at a more at a decent price, and you could have that access that wasn't as easy to get to when the trio played. So you have all these phases, you have new songs that are great, and this was, to me, the best live year to see John Mayer that I've seen him. I've only seen him in 2 other touring years, but to me this was the best that I was able to see him at. And also, I know back in his Continuum days, I did not go to one of his shows there for the Continuum tour. While that was kind of his best music, and probably will be his best music that he ever makes as far as an album, he didn't have as much music to work with back then. This tour, he had so many more things to choose from, and he mixed it up. So he didn't do the same set every night. He didn't go fish and perform every song where you're like, what's this song, what's that song? He had the hits, he had some deep cuts, he had some awesome covers. And the solo stuff this year, John was on fire across the world. Next thing we want to talk about is Dead and Company. That is the second way that John Mayer did his thing this year. And one of the things that I liked about this year for Dead and Company was when John Mayer played the blues, John Mayer played the blues. Each year that this band, Dead and Company, grows into who they are, their players, Oteil and John and some other members there, are really getting into their primary skills and what they're asked to do, and what they know their roles better, really. And it was apparent this year. I saw Dead and Company here in Hartford, Connecticut on Thanksgiving Eve, and it was a great, great show. Hopefully the ticket prices go down if they continue touring, because man, one of the things that sucks about how great this band is Ticketmaster, the promoters, whoever, man, these prices are wilding. I mean, that's a whole different thing. But Dead and Company, it was a great part of John Mayer's year. And you also got baseball parks, which suck, but you also had arena touring on both coasts. So you could see him in Vegas, and you could see him even where I was in Connecticut and New York in an arena, if you didn't want to pay those outrageous prices to be 300 feet in the air at a ballpark. Love Fenway Park, love Citi Field. I go to baseball games there when my Yankees are playing. But bro, if you're not at the soundboard like I was last year for Dead and Company in the baseball parks, it sucks. Anyway, let's try to be positive. Let's try to remember this is about John and not about my hatred of baseball concerts here. The last thing we want to talk about here is John Mayer and what he did really in some kind of unique events. So he did some shows with Dave Chappelle, and he will be doing one tomorrow. If you're in LA on December 31st, New Year's Eve, he'll be at the LA Forum with Dave Chappelle. Now, before this Forum show, all his other Dave Chappelle related shows where they played together here, different comedy and music, these were very, very intimate shows in smaller kind of standing room type crowds in various cities on a whim. They would just release them. Tickets go on sale. You have to show photo ID at the door, so it really stopped from the scalpers being able to flip these tickets, because it was just an intimate show where they required ID with the purchase. So this was definitely a dope thing, because you have someone like John Mayer, someone like Dave Chappelle, who really have huge venues now. They're really, really popular. They can't do smaller crowds as much, and they're just surprising you spontaneously and saying, hey, let's do a couple shows together. And then even with John Mayer, just kind of overlapping with the solo touring, he did something with Bud Light where he did a show at a dive bar. So those shows that John did at these smaller venues was something that a lot of artists don't do. Now, I think, what was it, Bono or U2 did something on Broadway. So that's, it does happen, and you do see certain stars do a couple special intimate shows, but most times those shows are for corporate sponsors. Those shows are for VIPs that have to shell out 5 or 10 grand, or you're in Mexico somewhere on a resort and you got to shell out $10,000 for a trip to see this band intimately. No, these were shows at real American cities at real decent prices, and you just had to really line up or be ready to have a ticket and show your ID. So that was a really cool thing that John did, is really giving the people access to an intimate setting without all this corporate or VIP, or you have to be a millionaire to go. So overall, I mean, I've talked about it all year, and maybe I do have a John Mayer bias, but I've been critical of John in previous years and previous albums. But this year, there's not much I could be critical of. I was really proud of what he did. I'm proud of the person he's becoming, because he's been a jerk, just to put it lightly, in previous years as well. He's been full of himself in previous years, and he's really getting out to the people. And you even see it now, too, with what he's doing on his Instagram lives, too. That's kind of a wild card there. It doesn't have anything to do with his concerts, but it's him chilling in a tour bus, him chilling at his crib, and he's just sharing some musical knowledge with people. He's sharing some tips and tricks for people like me that are trying to still continue to always get better at guitar every day. So it was really just a year where he gave his all. And again, John, if you're watching, we wish you the best health-wise with that emergency surgery, and even with the touring. Hopefully your vocal cords and everything is good, because we know you've had surgeries. But this was certainly your year, Mr. Johnny C. Mayer. Definitely like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys for checking out this video, and I hope all of you guys have a happy new year. Hopefully you guys are going to some New Year's Eve shows too as well. There's tons of them all across the country, and they're always great times if you love music. But other than that, safe travels. Don't do anything stupid. Be safe, and have a happy 2018. Take care, guys.